Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Tottenham Hotspur are back in action in about 48 hours time, a bit less than that. Praise the Lord. Just, I'm not minding this World Cup. It's not as bad as I kind of built it up in my head to be in terms of the football mid-season. It's been all right. There's been some decent games, there's been some rubbish games, but I just want to be at Tottenham Hotspur back. And I know this is behind closed doors friendly. I know it's not going to have all the big stars because, a lot of them obviously at the World Cup. But it's Tottenham Hotspur. It feels like a sense of normality will return. Whether that's a good thing or not, I don't know. But I can't wait, honestly. So if you're not aware, I did the story yesterday about the fact that Spurs are playing Motherwell 1 p.m. on Friday at Hotspur Way in a training ground friendly, which is going to be on Spurs Play. So behind closed doors, but not, because it's on Spurs Play. And I'm not even allowed in. I've asked, but apparently no journalists, no scouts, anyone. But it's on Spurs Play. I don't know. I didn't moan. I think I was just so excited to actually be able to watch some Tottenham football in some capacity. But yeah, I did ask to go. Hey, I don't get it. I don't understand. Is something behind closed doors when the door is open to the cameras? I don't know. But yeah, so Motherwell, Friday, 1 p.m. Looking forward to seeing how that works. Because normally behind closed doors friendlies, normally the structure of a game that you'd know in terms of 45 minutes, often you'll have three 30-minute periods is what they do in those kind of training games almost, so they can try out different systems, formations, players. So it'd be interesting to see whether it's still because of the presence of the camera. I mean, I guess, something they can obviously sell Spurs Play on, can't they, I guess, from a marketing point of view, but do they compromise it for that? Does it become a normal game, or do they stick? Because actually, personally, I'd be more intrigued to see it as 3 30-minute segments because you kind of get a sense then of what Conte wants to do with certain players and little ideas he's had that he wants to see and how it works. But we'll find out. That's obviously now been confirmed since I did my story. They've put a piece out on that. The other friendly that I understand they're expected to do on December 21st, which is a Wednesday, 5 days before the return of the Premier League for Spurs and Brentford, is that Spurs are going to host Nice, Ligue 1 side Nice, on at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So yes, that would be good. That's for fans as well, from what I understand. I don't think that's been absolutely finalised yet, but from what I understand, that's the plan. I think they've got to dot the I's and cross the T's, as it were. Someone pointed out to me, I think there's an ambulance strike that day, so I'm not entirely sure how that works in terms of kind of the medical side of things. But yeah, I'm sure that'll be confirmed pretty soon. But yeah. So, looking forward to that one. Sorry, getting pinged messages during it, which are all to do with Tottenham stuff. So yeah, that was very unprofessional. I do apologise. Actually, another apology I have to do. Last video I did last week, once in every few months it seems to do this for some reason. Something glitches in the video. It's in the original video, and the audio goes out of sync with the video. Normally, when it's happened in the past, on the occasions it has, it's been later in the video, but really frustratingly in this one, it was about 9 minutes in, so I really do apologise for that. If it happens again, it gives you a great excuse not to look at this and just listen, because it's very disconcerting. It's very awkward to watch if and it's like that, and the words are coming out, that little bit later. So yeah, I know, I'm sorry about that. And actually, I wouldn't even been aware of it, because obviously I have a little look at the videos before I put them up. But for some reason, that one, I think I must have just not quite got to the 9th minute in checking various bits. Probably went to the end very quickly. And yeah, so I do apologise. It's not a great look. But it's something to do with my phone. I don't know. Maybe experts on here will be able to tell me. Someone said about frame rates and all this sort of stuff. So I tried various things, but I'll probably do it again in this video, and I'll be really annoyed. But yeah, so Nice, I think we'll get an announcement on that quite soon. That'll be a good one because you'll have the bulk of the squad back for that. So if you're not aware of what's happening with training, um, so how do I start from the beginning? So Conte's fully back now, working with the trainers, with the players. In the early days of the return, it was fitness stuff, a bit like when they returned for pre-season, so he wasn't really involved or needed. Now he is fully back and they're doing tactical sessions. Who have I seen out there? I know Cess is back working on the grass, but not quite back fully with the squad yet. Or certainly that was the case of yesterday when I was asking around. So I think since then some pics have shown him out on the grass, but I think he's not quite back with the full squad yet. So whether the Motherwell game comes a little bit too soon, we'll see. So he's back in. Obviously, Rodrigo Bentancur, we know, picks up that injury at the World Cup. From reports in Uruguay early yesterday, they were saying it's a 5mm tear of his adductor muscle in his right leg, which apparently they say he's already back in London recovering from that. With that, the rough time frame seems to be 3 to 4 weeks, which actually, in a weird way for Spurs, works out quite nicely as an injury can be, because he's suspended for Brentford anyway on Boxing Day. So his next match would be Aston Villa at home on New Year's Day, and the word in Uruguay seems to be that he could be back for that. So that would work out quite well in terms of Tottenham. It's interesting to see what happens with the Motherwell game, because also Ben Davies, I'm not entirely sure what's... I know Ben Davies obviously picked up a knock, didn't he, towards the end of his Wales last game, so I'm not entirely sure the latest. I've got to check in on him and find out what's happening with him. But Motherwell, you'll get to see a lot of the players that obviously aren't back from the World Cup yet. The process of what's happening with returning players from the World Cup is they're going to be given between a week and 2 weeks. I've been told it's not quite a full 2 weeks rest, but they will get just over a week. So, let's for honest, for example, Sonny, he'll be back next. Let me think. Is it next week? Yes, it'll be next week. So won't be around for the Motherwell game unless he decides he doesn't want to rest and wants to come back quickly. And you do wonder, sometimes that happens. You know, there is technically a specified kind of a specified like time allotment of rest. I know they've done this in the past. FIFA used to have this rule where you had to have 3 weeks rest after a tournament. Obviously, the bizarre nature of this World Cup means it's probably not really possible. So yeah, from what I understand from Spurs, it seems to be between a week and 2 weeks. So that could be 1.5. I guess it depends technically when they leave Qatar. So Sonny, you'd think, will be back sometime in the middle of next week. But this, who they're going to have to play in this one will be interesting, because I forgot to say, in the middle of the two matches, because you might think, there's a little gap between the two friendlies. From what I understand, it's going to be they're going to do they're going to utilise the development squad. So they're going to have they call it like an inter-club friendly, is what they call it, where essentially it's first team against the development squad. And it's a way for Conte to look at, I guess, systems, formations, players in certain roles and see how that works. So obviously very informal, and I'm sure at any point he could stop the game, do a little training thing on something and go on with it. But that's something apparently that's going to happen in the middle. But yeah, I'm intrigued to see who plays, because hopefully Jed Spence will be involved. I mean, I suppose with Sessegnon not quite back in full training yet, if there's a chance that he doesn't play any part, and obviously Perisic's still at the World Cup, Matt Doherty, you'd presume, would then be on the left, maybe Harvey White playing there as well, or maybe some of the other youngsters that can play there. But it does hopefully open door for Jed Spence to get a few more minutes on the right. Obviously, all the right wing backs are back, Emerson, Doherty and Jed Spence. So yeah, it's interesting to see what's going to happen there. Hopefully Jed Spence gets some minutes. just any game time to show Conte that he's listening to everything he's teaching him would be awesome. Brian Hill, of course, will get some minutes. Pape Matar won't be back, you'd think, for this Motherwell game, unless, again, you don't know. Some players might just decide it's actually more beneficial for them to get back and get into the system, or back into training and everything with Spurs. Some will obviously take the extra time required to have that little bit of rest. You know, some players like Pape Matar have played no minutes. The most minutes we've seen Pape Matar play this season, unless you've watched the Premier League 2 games, has been at the World Cup, which is, that's something, isn't it? That he's had to go to the other side of the world and play in the World Cup just to get some minutes. But he was quite bright. He's had 2 appearances, hasn't he? The second game against England, came on at half-time, got a full 45 minutes. I thought he was quite bright. I thought he looked to try and take the game to England. He looks quite tactically intelligent, the way he plays. Yeah, I don't think it was the worst cameo in the world at all. I thought, for a 20-year-old now, I didn't think he did himself any harm whatsoever. And again, if he is to go out on loan in January, having that World Cup on your resume, having played at the African Cup of Nations and won that as well, it's not a bad look for your CV whatsoever. So, personally, I mean, it all depends on what happens with that 5th slot in the central midfield. Because at the moment, obviously, we know he's got Bentancur, when he's back, Højbjerg, Basuma and Skip. But if you're going to play midfield 3 at times, of course, there needs to be kind of a 5th option there as well. And whether that's someone they bring in, and if it's not, then really Harvey White or Pape Matar have to kind of battle it out for that last place where you're only going to be used in emergencies, probably in their case. It's not the ideal role. It's not one any young player really, I don't think, wants. They want to go away and play. Harvey White obviously had a really good loan spell at Portsmouth a couple of seasons ago. He could really do with that happening again, something like that. Pape Matar, I think now needs the second half of the season to play myself. But yeah, probably against Nice. Like I say, Wednesday, 21st December. Looks like it will be the day. I'd give him some minutes out there. It'd be just nice to see him in action, especially playing at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium as well, because I'm not entirely sure yet how big they're going to be able to go crowd-wise, but it is going to be open to the public. You'll be able to buy tickets. You'd presume it will be on Spurs play as well. I don't know definitely, but you'd presume it would be. But yeah, for Pape Matar, possibly in that second game as well. And the Bentancur injury and suspension anyway for Brentford means that you'd think Pape Matar will be on the bench at Brentford as well. So it's all a chance for him to kind of show Conte what he's learned, not only at the World Cup, but in these kind of coming weeks as well. Who else could play? Japhet Tanganga desperately needs game time. I think he's had 17 minutes in one appearance this season, which really isn't very good. Just realised his camera's actually slightly off to the side. So you've kind of got to... Sorry, I could only apologise. Japhet Tanganga needs game time. Just anything. And he also desperately needs to go out on loan, I feel. Alfie Devine has definitely been training with the first team. I've seen him kind of out there with them. I was trying to think of some of the young players. I did write down somewhere all the young players I saw, certainly in the training photos. Did I write them down here somewhere? That would be really helpful if I did. No, I wrote them somewhere. I'll find them in a bit. They're definitely in there. Sorry. Oh, there we go. I did write them down. Romain Mundle, Maxim Pascozzi, Alfie Devine, Charlie Sayers, Brooklyn Linus Foster, Iago Santiago, Niall John, Max Robson, and Alfie Whiteman. Obviously, Alfie Whiteman back from his Degerfors loan. I knew I wrote it down there somewhere. Alfie Devine, hopefully get a few minutes. Very, very talented young player. Again, you'd imagine he'll go out on loan in January. He was meant to go out in the summer, but picked up a hamstring injury. I watched him do it at the Lamex just before the end of the window, which was it's an absolute nightmare. But he's come back, looked good and strong, looks to be really playing above development squad level. 3 goals in 5, I think it was, in UEFA Youth League as well. So banging him in Europe as an attacking midfielder. Obviously, if you know Alfie Devine, you know he's the club's youngest ever goal scorer. That goal against Marine when he was 16, wasn't he? He's 18 now. Went off with England, won the European Under-19 Championship with Dane Scarlett as well. And yeah, there's no development squad games until January. So really, it's kind of opened up for those development squad players to get a couple of minutes in these friendlies if he needs them to. The other one, and there wasn't among those list of names that I said, mainly probably because they've been involved in under-18 stuff as well. I think you'd hope we might see Will Lancashire or maybe Jamie Donnelly involved, because when you look at it, obviously Harry Kane's away at the World Cup, Richarlison's away at the World Cup still. Sonny is, like I say, back next week, so he should probably miss the Motherwell game. So Spurs are really light on strikers. Obviously, depends on Lucas Moura and where he's at with his inflamed, tendon that he had. There was some talk, wasn't there? I was trying to think, did Conte say he might have surgery in the winter? I can't remember now. Another one I've got to check up on. But they're light on strikers, unless you play Kulusevski or Brian Hill up there, and they're not obviously, natural strikers. So that leads me to wonder. So if you're not aware of Will Lancashire, a little brief explain on Will. He's 17-year-old. Spurs signed him from Sheffield United in the summer. It went a bit under the radar with everything else they did in the summer, but when you actually look at the price tag for a 17-year-old that hasn't played a single first team game, it could rise to $2.5 million. That's a lot of kind of belief in the potential of a player. Certainly Sheffield United had high hopes for him. He was released by Arsenal in 2021. I think it was January 2021. Sheffield United went in there quickly, signed him up. He's 6'1". It's a big lad for a 17-year-old. And let's put it this way. Sheffield United signed him up and he scored 40 goals, including 5 hat-tricks and 7 braces, from 35 starts and 15 subs appearances across their academy, under 23s and under 18s. It's an absolute goal machine. Captain their under 18s. They won the Professional Development League national title with an unbeaten season. And I think his impressive season tied in nicely with Spurs having kind of looking to restock their certainly attacking options as well in the development squad and youth under 18s. Because obviously Dane Scarlett's gone out, Troy Parrott's gone out as well. And yeah, Spurs have got these emerging, what are they called? Emerging talent scouts they brought in. I know they brought in a chap called, Chris Scudder? That was it. Who'd worked at West Ham, Derby, Brentford, places like that. And those scouts apparently a lot of them pushed for Will Lancashire to be brought in. They felt he was one of the kind of most talented ones around at that level. And he only had 12 months left of his scholarship at terms at Sheffield United as well. They wanted to give him, they had a professional deal ready for him, but I think Brentford and Spurs were both looking at him. And he's actually a Spurs fan. From what I'm told, he comes from a family that's split down the middle of Arsenal and Spurs fans, but he's a Spurs fan. So as soon as Spurs became interested, it became a bit of a one-way kind of path where he wanted to go. And yeah, 3-year deal Spurs signed him up to. Took him a little while to get fit. He came with a small injury, but he worked hard with the fitness coaches. And I remember his first game, we came off the bench against Wolves and scored twice. He's got 7 in 11 games since he's come back as well. I think the next step for him now is to kind of score for the under-23s as well. Did score, the under-18s played West Ham the other day and he scored a hat-trick and Spurs somehow threw it away. Lost 4-3. But yeah, honestly, he's a big lad. He's kind of a bit of an old school, kind of a throwback centre forward with a bit of, with technique. Don't get me wrong, he's not skillful or anything, but he is a bit, he's got a bit of that kind of toughness, like the old style English centre forward you'd kind of think of. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see. I know he's trained with the first team a few times as well, so Conte's had a look at him. So you do wonder whether the lack of strikers means he might get a little minute or two. It might not, but he might do. I'm going to go and watch next week. Is the under-18s are in the FA Youth Cup. It's QPR they're playing at Alamex. So is that Tuesday night? I'm going to go and watch that as well. I'd hope that he will be playing. And Jamie Donnelly. Jamie Donnelly, you mustn't forget as well, honestly, very talented young striker at Spurs. He's been kind of pushing back into a more like a deeper role this season. They've been playing as an attacking midfielder at times to kind of flesh out, I guess, his skill set, his development. He's been doing very well. I've got his stats here as well. Where is he? He has 9 goal involvements in 21 games, so 4 goals and 5 assists. And yeah, it'd be intriguing to see if they use either of those. You know, both very young, but it's a good experience. I'm all for kind of, especially at friendlies, giving young players a little chance and any competitions. I know Conte maybe isn't of the view of giving young players those chances when it actually comes to competitive games, but it'll be good for them. And Harvey White, I mentioned Harvey White earlier, kind of almost like the forgotten man. Since he had that Portsmouth loan, he's going to come back to Spurs, and other than playing under Mourinho a couple of times, he's been on the bench loads for Conte and just hasn't got a minute. I do feel sorry for him because he's a talented young man. He's only 20, I think he is. He can play in central midfield, he can play in a deeper role, he can play in an attacking role, he can play as a left back, great free kick taker. Yeah, you'd imagine that he'll get some minutes in these friendlies. Occasionally Conte name checks him as like a little kind of, well done, I notice you, but I'm never going to play you. But you know, he's a talented lad, Harvey, he really is. For me, again, needs a loan. If Spurs bring in anyone that can play in central midfield in January, I think they need to get Harvey White and Pape Matar out on loan for their own development more than anything. And like I say, you know, those players I mentioned, Niall John, of course, spoken about Niall before. It's coming towards the end of his contract. Doesn't look like there's a pathway really for him to come into the first team, but be interesting to see whether that stops him getting first team minutes or whether they give him that to maybe make him think about a new contract. I don't know, but yeah, he's got some interest in him as well. I think he'll be a good young player. It'd be interesting to see. A lot of these young players, you kind of don't know entirely what their level's going to be until you get to see them really in the flesh playing first team matches, whatever level that's at, and you get a better sense of it. Because academy football, they can look fantastic, but then it's all about applying that to the man's game, the senior game, and how they take that on board. How they deal with being whacked and how they deal with less space and faster matches. Yeah, that'd be interesting to see. So we've got that friendly. Really looking forward to that. Is that weird that I'm looking forward more to a friendly against Motherwell with not even Spurs top players than I probably am about most of these World Cup matches? It's weird, isn't it? Such a tribal thing, football. And obviously it does help in my job to have more Spurs things to talk about. Let's talk about the World Cup, though. There are a few little Spurs things we can talk about. Obviously, Harry Kane, fantastic. Scored a goal, man of the match performance, or player of the match performance, they call it, against Senegal. I wrote a piece about it, kind of about the hypocrisy of a lot of the ways he's been spoken about in this World Cup. I didn't think his performance was that different to his other performances, but just because he finally got some service to put the ball in the net, everyone was raving about him again. And it's a bit like, but he did all the terrific stuff off the ball. You know, it did make me chuckle that, I can't remember who it was Lee Dixon. I can't remember who the pundit was. And they were raving about Harry Kane playing in this deeper role, being able to pull the strings, and how when you've got a world-class player playing in that kind of position, and it's just like, have a word with everyone that was moaning in the last couple of games about him dropping too deep. Because you can't have it both ways. I feel like Harry Kane gets judged on what those around him do. So Harry Kane drops back, plays a terrific De Bruyne-style pass, which everyone would rave about if it was De Bruyne or Pirlo from the past or anyone like that. But he plays it, and then let's say, great example, I guess, Rashford in the Wales game, wasn't it? Run through, doesn't score. Otherwise, Harry Kane gets 2 assists that night. Everyone raves about it, and it's great. But because other players haven't really been twigging to how you play around Harry Kane, it's like, if he drops back, bomb on, because he is going to probably 90% chance of finding you with the pass. And at Spurs, you see it. Sonny will run on, Kulusevski will run on, but not only them. Bentancur will run on, Højbjerg will run past, because they know that he can pick them out, and it's a moment to attack. And yeah, shock horror, when the England players realise that, it results in goals and stuff. He was involved in way in all 3 goals, wasn't he? Whether directly or indirectly, whether his movement. For the first goal, it's kind of his movement more than anything else. But yeah, I don't get it. I saw, I think I said this before, I've seen Morata being praised for essentially just standing up front and waiting for the ball to come in. You know, he's so focused. I can't remember what the pundit was now, who it was. But, you know, he's so focused, just stays up there as a great target for them. And then Harry Kane was brought into the conversation. It's like, well, no. Harry Kane is an amazing all-round striker. He's a brilliant number. He's a world-class number 9. He's a world-class number 10. Build your team around that man. Honestly. It just feels funny that, you know, one moment they're saying he comes too deep. The next moment he's an incredible, creative, deep-lying striker. It's amazing what a goal will do. But, you know, talking of the goals, if only he had the service that he provides to others. I saw this stat Opta put out, which is just incredible, right? This is their stat. I'm going to read it out. He's now scored in World Cups, so he's had 2 of them, 7 goals from just 7 shots on target. And that's the most of any player with 100% of the shot conversion rate with shots on target since 1966. It's just mad. That shows how little service he's had. He's had to feed off of scraps, and he's scored 7 goals and 7 shots on target. That is clinical. Can you imagine what Harry Kane would be like if he was getting the ball pinged into him all the time? Honestly, he'd be at the Golden Boot stage. He would be up there with Mbappe now with goals in this tournament, probably with the assists as well. You know, he's only 1 up behind Rooney now. 53 is the target. He's on 52. At his 2 World Cups, put this in perspective, Harry Kane has had 10 direct goal involvements from 10 matches. 7 goals, 3 assists. Honestly, I could just walk along the streets with a sandwich board saying Harry Kane's the greatest. I easily could, because I don't understand why he doesn't get more praise or respect, I guess, than he does. It baffles me. It really does. Elsewhere in the World Cup, even Perisic played well. Brilliant header. Such a good header. Helped send Croatia through. He's had a good tournament. He's kind of warming up more and more as it goes on as well. Richarlison, another brilliant goal. I saw someone saying when you realise Richarlison scored the best and second best goals at the World Cup, it was like kind of keepy uppy with his head, wasn't it? It reminded me of what was his name? There was a young Brazilian kid who that was his thing. That was his speciality. He would keep the ball on his head. They called it the seal, was it? I can't remember what the name of it was now. And he used to be really big. And the reason I really remember him was because he used to play a lot of Football Manager. And he was one of the key players you used to always try and buy. And I don't think his career really went anywhere. I'm sure you'll tell me. Those who remember him will put it in the comments. He was a young Brazilian player. And he used to, his trademark was kind of running down the wing with the ball on his head, like bouncing up and down. But yeah, Richarlison's goal, it was beautiful. It was just wonderful. And all the dancing stuff with the manager joining in. Is it disrespectful? I don't think so. I think it's just enjoying the moment. And it's kind of what you expect from Brazilian football, that they enjoy it, that kind of samba style to it all. Obviously gutted for Sonny. South Korea should be absolutely proud of where they got to in this tournament. I'm sure they would have wanted to do better against Brazil, but Brazil were just clinical, weren't they? They really were. And obviously Sonny will come back now, and he just needs to get his season back on track. Obviously, such a huge kind of inspiring moment when in those final moments when they got themselves out of the group. So that will be a massive, massive plus for them, and something for him to take on as well. I'm very bright in this video. I just realised that. I think it's because it's getting darker outside, and so the light in here. Let me do that, so I'm not as like there's a nuclear explosion going on. And yes, I did just adjust a lamp. I didn't used to do that, but I've noticed that the videos were getting kind of darker and darker, so I got a desk lamp which I put on the floor. I'm not one of those fancy Instagram types that has like, don't have these like circle things that light up. It is literally a desk lamp, like the one you see in the Pixar logo, but black, sitting on the floor. Behind the scenes of a very, very simple video. So disappointed for Sonny, but hopefully now he kicks on and has a brilliant end to the season, because Obviously, the second half of last season was incredible for him. He swept his way to the Golden Boot. First half wasn't too bad either. But yeah, we know Sonny can be better, and he's said himself he can be better than he has been. And if we see Sonny back and firing, Spurs will be back and firing as well. So yeah, that's him. Højbjerg back surprisingly early as well, with Denmark as well. So Conte will be one of those where I think he'll be looking at this tournament. Of course, he'll have wanted his players to go as far as they could. But I do think there'll be an element for him of, I've got some players kind of back, not knackered for the second half of the season. Højbjerg's not going to be tired. Bentancur, of course, the injury, but, he won't be tired. Sonny back without being pushed too much, although obviously he didn't play in the weeks before, so he wasn't probably going to be too tired anyway. Trying to think of who else there is. Let's come back early. I think they're the key ones you think of game time wise, and obviously Kane and Richarlison. We hope both of them will go on and get more game time. Big match, England-France is so huge. Mbappe is big, but France are there to be got at, I think. France defensively are there to be got at, but attacking-wise, of course, any team with Kylian Mbappe on there is quite capable of ripping through your defence. But England's defence has been one of the strongest points, isn't it? Just those 2 goals against Iran, isn't it? And they were a bit kind of iffy as well. But yeah, not. It's going to be a good game. As much as I kind of moan about this middle of the World Cup, middle of the season World Cup, there's some good games. There's some good games to come as the kind of competition hots up, and obviously some shocks with Spain going out as well. Although Spain, it's a funny one. Despite that thumping that they gave Costa Rica, same old problem, isn't it? It's not having that kind of lethal striker. Some incredibly talented players in the attacking areas, but having a natural striker that's going to bang the goals in. It's Morata, I think he's a good player. For me, I've never really seen him as a lethal striker, and I think that did show a little bit at this World Cup. But he's not a bad player, don't get me wrong. But yeah, he's not someone I'd rely on to score goals if my life depending on it, I guess is the way to put it. So that's the World Cup. What else I've got to tidy up? Watched Dane Scarlett play for Portsmouth against Wycombe at the weekend on, was it Saturday? No, Sunday. Sunday lunchtime. Watched him. It was an interesting performance. It kind of showed a bit of all sides to a young player's game. He had some really good moments. Lots of stuff he could work on. I thought his hold-up play was very good, very intelligent. Movement off the ball was superb. Had a late diving header where his movement was brilliant. And he got into the great position, dived for the ball and headed it straight at the keeper. So either side, that would have been it. Kind of what he needs to work on. The final touch, some of the decision-making. He could have, on another day, ended up with a goal and an assist in the game. But he just, little decision-making in the final third, just needed to kind of be stepped up. He was knocked off the ball a couple of times. But I would say on the whole, physically, he handled it quite well, the game. It's all about learning for him now. You could see he's incredibly fit. You can see the Conte work on him. Gianpiero Ventroni worked previously with him as well. You could actually, it reminded me, Gianpiero Ventroni's son. Is it Sam? I can't remember his name. He came to the training ground the other day to see the tree. They all planted a tree a little while back, and he came to kind of see it growing and everything. It was really nice. Conte put it on his various social media platforms. But yeah, back to Dane Scarlett. I'm intrigued to see kind of where he goes in terms of how high he can go. There's a lot of people very excited about him. He's still got a lot of learning to do. He's very raw. Danny Cowley said last week he scored against MK Dons, and he said of Dane Scarlett's performance, it was the best defensive performance he'd seen from a striker in 15 years of coaching. Just the way he worked off the ball. And Conte would love that. That's exactly what he wants. Conte says, he said he's going to be a big player. It's now all about him. There's so many players that get the hype, get the excitement around them, but then don't make it. It can be through injuries, but it can also be through opportunities. But it can also be about themselves and whether they just believe they've made it. it's the old cliche. Like I go to the training ground, so I'll see the development squad players often park in the same car park as us. Well, we see them kind of rocking up in very nice cars. Clearly, they've got a little bit of money behind them already, and you do wonder mentally how difficult it is to stay focused when you're already getting a lot of the things in life that other people your age aren't. And this isn't kind of criticise them in any way. They've worked hard to get there. It's a very small pool of people that even get to that level in football, let alone then go on to get real professional long careers out of it. But yeah, it takes a real special mindset, I guess, when everything's being thrown at you in terms of money and things like that, but also people telling you, promising you the world, I guess, agents and things like that, to keep your focus and keep yourself, able to kind of realise that there's so much more to do. And the best ones are the ones that understand that. Harry Kane's a great example of a guy that just worked constantly. And he's got himself to the level that he's at now as, one of the world's best. It doesn't matter how talented you are. I know so many young players that were among the most talented players you'll ever see on a football pitch, but they never became proper professional footballers because they just didn't have that mentality side of it. You need to sacrifice. You need to give up so much in your life and dedicate yourself to this singular path, really. It's a tough game. It is a tough game. It's like any other field, I guess, in terms of I suppose acting's a good one, isn't it? Only the very, very best in the world really go on to be the people we see on the big screen. And yeah, football's no different. But yeah, keep an eye on Dane Scarlett. Let's see how he goes. I mean, so young. He only passed his driving test last month. It's just mad how young these players are now. And I see people, they're kind of like, if they've not made it by the time they're 18 or 19, they're like written off. I see it on Twitter all the time. About Dane, I did a piece on Dane the other day, and people say, same as Troy Parrott, it's done already. It's like, give him time. Give him a little bit of time. Harry Kane didn't really start coming through until he was 2021. And other players have come through later in their career. I mean, Ian Wright's a great example. Down the road at Arsenal, he was playing non-league football, wasn't he? It's just like, for those wonder kids that are 16, 17 and burst onto the stage are so rare. They're not the norm. Most players will suddenly develop and become, they'll catch your eye when they just get that little bit older. But yeah, we all love a wonder kid in football, of course we do. It's a kind of a knock-on effect, I guess, of Football Manager and games like that. Yeah. What else we got? Spurs financial results will be coming soon. I'm told that's all being worked on. So we'll have plenty to drill into and dive into and understanding that. Not only what's been and gone and paid for and spent on, but also what's come in and recouped and what it means for the future. And particularly January, you'd imagine, as well. And normally we get a Daniel Levy kind of has to explain it like a chairman's message around it as well. So yeah, looking forward to kind of picking those apart. That will definitely be in a future video. All the Juventus stuff and Fabio Paratici, it's too early to know what that's going to mean. Obviously, if you're not aware, investigations going on to various things that happened at Juventus. Things like this are going to happen before. Juventus are a club that like to involve themselves in the spotlight. And we don't really know what it means at this stage. It's all conjecture at this moment in what it could possibly mean. Whether anything has broken any kind of football rules or anything like that when they drill down into it, or any other kind of rules, I don't know. It's far too early to kind of suggest what it means for Paratici and what it means for Spurs, I guess, as a knock-on effect. We don't know. It could be nothing, if any. We don't know. So we'll have to kind of see what happens with that as the weeks and maybe months go on. These things, they properly do drag on when they kind of investigate. It's an interesting Italian football. It's mad, isn't it? Well, I guess it's not just Italian football. It's all football. I guess clubs have to operate within certain parameters, and they try to operate in certain ways to remain within those. And then you do wonder whether sometimes if you kind of drill down into one club, do you open up something that's actually problematic for lots of clubs? Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I have no idea what's really properly gone on. I've kind of read the same things you guys have read, spoken to some like Italian journalists as well. And yeah, it's just too early to know what it all really means, if anything. It might mean absolutely nothing to Tottenham in any way. What else? I watched... There's a documentary on Spurs play, Broxbourne and Beyond. I really recommend it. It's superb. It's like a dual story. It's a behind-the-scenes documentary of Tottenham Hotspur women right now, but also a story about how they came to be. People don't realise how young that club is. You know, it started off as Broxbourne Ladies in the 80s, only became affiliated with Spurs in the mid-90s. And they went from grassroots football, I mean, properly just having a bag of shirts, bag of balls, and going onto a piece of grass in Broxbourne, playing in, like, I think it was the Greater London leagues, to now Women's Super League team and one of the fastest growing, biggest kind of clubs out there. And we've, finished 5th last season, the Women's Super League, ambitions of playing in the Champions League. It's an incredible story. The documentary's good. It's about an hour long. I really recommend you watch it. I do think a lot of people, and I understand it, but a lot of people just look at the surface of a football club and they might just look at the men's team. Then you get people that maybe pay a slight interest to the academy, which is something I've always really been interested in. I'd like to see the path and development and what can be. And then there's the women's team, obviously, which is such a growing side of football now. And the Spurs story is fascinating. There's so many interesting characters. And, the head coach right now, Rhian Skinner, is a terrific coach. And some of the players, like, you'll realise, like Jenna Scalacci, she's retired now. I think she's head of academy operations for the women now. And also a pundit on a lot of football on TV as well. Her story is brilliant because she was a 16-year-old that turned up to a training session for Spurs women. And while she went away for a couple of years after that, she kind of came back and she spent, I think it's about 11, 12 seasons at the club. 3 promotions. She was captain. So honestly, there's so many great stories in there. It's a really good documentary. It's well worth it. I recommend it. Just knowing a little bit more about everything that shapes the football club. Yeah, it's nice. It's really nice to see those original ladies that founded it as well. Honestly, unfortunately, one of them's passed away now, but they talk about it. And then the 2 ladies that took it on, and then Glenn Weaver in the middle, he was the chairman as well. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2015, I think it was. But he's 5 founders, essentially. They're like the core people that really created it before it was brought to Tottenham, and then Tottenham kind of took over as they had to, because when it was coming into Women's Super League, it had to suddenly become a very, very professional outfit. A professional outfit. They had to go from not just being amateurs or part-timers, and the governance side of it had to be massively brought in line with the men's and academy stuff. So it's a good documentary. Often, club documentaries can be a little bit sanitised, and I'm sure this is in some ways. I'm sure there's various things that have happened that wouldn't have made it in there, but it's a good look at the women's game. And some of those players, like Ashley Neville, that plays for him as well, and it's a nice little kind of insight into their lives as well, and how it works as a women's player as well. And the way they're inspiring lots of young girls out there to take up the sport. It's obviously with the Lionesses as well. Honestly, I do recommend it. I really do. I sound like I'm the PR man for it, but it's just one of those things where I watched it and I thought, I did an article on it, kind of 5 things I learned from it, and yeah, I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't enjoy it. You know that when I talk about football, when I talk about TV and movies, I don't really recommend anything that I haven't liked. Actually, on that note, watch Fleabag. Brilliant series. Honestly, one of my favourite shows now ever. Defending Jacob, another brilliant one. Caught up with a few shows that I should have watched at the time and didn't. They were brilliant. And I just realised, of course, I'm wearing this t-shirt. Indiana Jones 5. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny trailer. Brilliant trailer, apart from one little CGI moment on a horse where his face has been clearly put on, and I don't know why that even got put through into a trailer. But the rest looks brilliant. De-aged. Harrison Ford as well, looking very cool. But enough of the sidetrack there. So I think that's probably everything I can kind of take on in terms of Tottenham stuff. But hey, 45 minutes without kind of needing the Q&A. I'm going to do a couple of questions because I've got some that people have put in and I feel bad if I don't address them. But yeah, we've got some Tottenham stuff to talk about, which is great. And I think we're now at the stage where I'm going to start hearing bits and pieces on transfer stuff. I'm going to start hearing little bits and pieces about players that they've been looking at. I know certainly from a younger level, I had a little look at Joe Taylor at Peterborough was someone they'd looked at as well. I think Ronnie Edwards at Peterborough was another one as well. They've kept a little eye on in the past as well. These kind of young players. Although I think Joe Taylor's, he might be 2021 now. He's one that kind of blossomed a little bit later. He's a Wales youth international. Ronnie Edwards, defender, if my mind serves me right. Obviously, look, these are those kind of names that I'm just putting in there talking about young players, which will then rock up in an aggregator account or something, and then you'll get the comments and like, oh yeah, we're not going to challenge for the Champions League with this, are we? And all that. We're talking about the young level. You've got to understand that recruitment departments, scouting departments look at different levels. They've got the ones who look to supply the first team, who are there to supply what comes on what we see on the pitch every week in, week out with the first team, what the ambitions are, those kind of players. But then you've also got the next level down where they look for the talents of the future, whether that's to stock up the development squad or whether it's to bring them in and then loan them out to help their development that way. It's like a bit of a machine. It all kind of serves itself. Like you can buy a young player for a certain price, and then in loan fees and the wages being paid, you essentially kind of pay it off before they even become of a level where either they're going to play for you or you're going to sell them. I guess it's a business in a way as well. Because you've got to kind of fund the academy as well. The academy is quite an expensive operation. But yeah. So there you go. What questions have I got? I can't answer this one. James J. McCombie asks, would you know if there's a way to reach and recommend songs to whoever is deciding what to play in the walkout at White Hart Lane or in the pre-match build-up? No. I don't know if they take recommendations. I'm not sure like they're the piano guy in a hotel. I don't think it works like that. But by all means, I don't know. Reply under the Twitter account. I don't know, the Spurs Twitter account. Brew2007 asks, have you seen any players that have had a good World Cup shine that look like a Conte player, Spurs player, either and or both? Hakimi's penalty was incredible, wasn't it, against Spain? But he's looked quite. You can see how good he. I mean, he is a Conte player. He's been a Conte player, and of course, he would fit like a glove at Spurs. I think under him, but I think price-wise, it's just he's always been out of that bracket. I thought Dumfries has looked good for Netherlands. I'd seen some people saying that he's not really the player, but I've actually been quite impressed with him. I think he'd work quite well. Hey, I'm going to rave about Jude Bellingham until the cows come home. Honestly, what an incredible young player. But again, an astronomical fee that the big boys in football, I think, are going to be battling over him in the coming months and years. The ones that have kind of really stood out to me. Obviously, there's the obvious ones at other teams as well, like Gavi as well at Spain, incredible talent. There's loads. They're quite well known. That's the thing about the World Cup. You're unlikely to find an unexpected gem. They're often if you're at the World Cup, it's probably because people know who you are. It's more maybe the nations that perhaps you haven't seen too much of, I guess, are the ones. What other questions we got? Nate Pete asks, have you watched the new Star Wars series Andor? In my opinion, the best Star Wars series to date. Yes, I have, and I loved it. It was differently paced, but it was brilliant. Really, really got you in the characters. It was excellent. Navala Robert asks, would you prefer Spurs to win the Champions League and Premier League or for you to be the next Indiana Jones? Definitely Spurs winning the Champions League and Premier League. I would be horrendous as the next Indiana Jones because I can't act. Definitely Spurs. People asking about Prachi. Like I say, don't know yet. Let's see what happens, and then we kind of as we know more. Barry McCormick also asked, do you think Spurs might follow Real Madrid and put a roof over the playing surface one day? I don't know whether they will. Maybe in the distant future. I know they'll be constantly looking to improve it. That's the point of the stadium, is you can constantly do that. So I think there's been talk about potentially improving the system that brings the pitch, takes it off. You know, the whatever it's called, the hydraulic system that brings it all off, because that can constantly be improved to be faster. Because I think the dream for Spurs is to have an NFL football double header. Presumably I don't know if you'd have one the same day and one later in the same day, or whether it'd be the next day. But yeah, just making that a quicker system. I think actually his NFL pitches has been something where they've got to change those. There's going to be a change to those as well. So whether that affects Tottenham and that pitch, there's constantly going to be updates to the stadium. That's the beauty of it. Unlike other stadiums that have been built maybe in the last 15, 20 years, is that the Spurs Stadium is absolutely kind of built to be able to be constantly updated all the time and improved. It's just going to be an amazing stadium for years to come. The Reverend Squally asks, what do you think of Black Panther, the Indiana Jones 5 trailer, and who's your potential World Cup signing so far for Spurs? Black Panther, a little bit disappointed with it. I understand why it had to be made the way it was, because obviously with Chadwick Boseman, you had to understandably pay tribute to, wonderful actor and everything, but I just felt it just made it quite a sad, I don't want to say depressing movie, but a movie looking back a lot and looking at death. And the first film was such an amazing kind of joyous movie, vibrant movie, that I just felt it lost a lot of the fun of that one. And I understand it. I just wonder whether it's a movie they could have maybe just waited a few years to make. But yeah, I know what it's like in that business. Indiana Jones 5 trailer, as I said, really loved it. As now a massive fan of Fleabag, very excited to see what Phoebe Waller-Bridge is like in it as well. And in terms of potential World Cup signing, I'd love it to be Jude Bellingham. It's never going to happen, but I would love it to be Jude Bellingham. He's incredible. Would you watch The Terrifier? As a film fan, it's a good, bad film. I've seen it. It's mad. It's the second one kind of is doing big things at the box office as well, I think, in terms of relatively for its budget. I was going about these. What else we got? Lee Hounslow asks, with Christmas coming up, what Tottenham books would you recommend for presents? Definitely The Glory Game, if you haven't read it, by Hunter Davies, who I met a couple of weeks back, and it was a massive honour because he's a legend. It's him following the team in the 70s, I think it was, for a season, just seeing absolutely behind the curtain. It's an amazing book. Julie Welsh, Dame Julie, the biography of Tottenham Hotspur is brilliant. And that's not just because there is a chapter entitled Alistair's Day Off. She's an incredible legend of journalism, as well as Hunter Davies, and that's a brilliant book. I'd say they're the two for me. I don't think there's a few biographies come out. I think Steve Perryman's had one come out as well, not too long ago. I haven't read that yet, so I'm sure it'll be excellent, though. He's got a man with a lot to say, and a terrific career, at Tottenham Hotspur, and he kind of been there, done it, and bought the T-shirt, did Steve Berryman, another lovely guy that I've interviewed before as well. I think Spurs-wise, that's the ones I can think of off the top of my head. Just trying to think what's on my bookshelf off to the side there. What else we got? That's about Rodrigo Bentancur. We know about that. Mike Naylor asks, do you think we should get Pickford in? He's a really confident commanding keeper who's also English. I believe we should definitely try and sign him. He has impressed me, Jordan Pickford. I used to think he was a little bit... I mean, he can have mistakes. All goalkeepers can have mistakes. But, yeah, I do like him. When I see him play for England, I do think he's a very, very good player. Would probably cost big money, I'd imagine. But, as a potential Lloris successor in the future, why not? G. Lovelock asks, which transfer at the club made you scratch your head the most? For me, it was Van der Vaart. I never understood why we sold him when we did. If I remember correctly, and this was before I was covering them as a club, I feel like it was because just Andre Villas-Boas didn't really kind of fancy him as much as a player, in terms of Villas-Boas was more about the hard-working, ultra-fit types, and he didn't fit that bill. Maybe a little bit like Conte nowadays. And I think there was a reason, I can't remember what it was, maybe he wanted to get back to... into Europe as in back near his home. I can't remember. It was a family situation or something. I can't remember. But yeah, I think there were reasons at the time. But I love Van der Vaart as a player. He's terrific. I'd love to sit down and interview him at some point. I think he'd be great. He seems a very honest chap as well, which would be good. What else we got here? Steve Destiny 74. Are Spurs working on a route from youth to first team with the new teams put in place? Is there going to be more of a plan? Also, if we keep buying wing backs, does that kind of force what manager you go for when Antonio Conte leaves? Yeah, it's an interesting one. I've said this before that Jed Spence was bought with Conte in mind. He's kind of ticks the boxes rather than being a conventional right back. So, yeah, from what I understand, they're working on that route from youth to first team. It hasn't been great recently, but yeah, no, I think that's that's such a football response. Certainly, some of the people being brought in, the likes of Simon Davies, obviously Dean Rastrick's an excellent manager of the academy as well. It's creating that path, isn't it? It's just so difficult though, because if you've got someone like Conte who trusts the ready-made now players, there's not going to be a pathway. He's not going to play them. There's only so far you can bring them along, I guess, and then maybe you loan them out, and that's where they have to kind of show that they're stars in the making. Dickhead Somalefi asked, Gold. I love when people say that. I know you say you don't want to mix things up with your YouTube videos and podcasts, but by any chance, are you ever going to do an All Things Spurs video with Rob Guest in the future? Yeah, I might get him on in the future to see if he wants to. We do our podcast, Golden Guest Talk Tottenham. We do little Facebook Live videos at times as well on on our work website. So yeah, who knows? Maybe. Last one, I'll go for this one. Malcolm Taylor asks, if Conte did decide to walk away, hypothetically, who would you like to take over and who do you think will? Who would I like to take over? I would have liked Graham Potter before obviously he went to Chelsea. I do think he's going to be a very, very good manager. I like the look of Ruben Amorim at Sporting. I think he's going to be a very good manager as well. I think you'd think odds were on. If Conte just suddenly had a meltdown and left right now, it would be probably likely to be Poch returning, you'd think. You'd imagine that Daniel Levy would go back to him, knowing the emotional attachment I think a lot of the fans would have. It's probably been enough time now between his period, his era at Spurs and now. He will have learnt a lot from the PSG experience, good and bad. But he needs to be given the money to operate. He needs to have the transfer kind of fees spent for him. He needs to have the backing. Be intrigued to see how he would work within a director of football, kind of sporting managing director of football, isn't it? That's Pratchett's thing, because he doesn't really like those setups, Poch. So whether that remain the case or not, yeah, there's a lot of questions. But there's a lot of good young managers out there, I do think. I really like what Eddie Howe's doing at Newcastle as well. Eddie Howe was such a good manager, and he kind of got battered a bit in terms of his reputation after being linked with bigger jobs like Arsenal and stuff like that. And now I feel he's kind of rebuilding it quite nicely at Newcastle. Yeah, some good young managers out there. Look, I want Conte to stay, and I want Conte to do what he does and win trophies for Tottenham. So ultimately, that's the main thing for me. That's what I want to see happen. Right. So I'm going to end it there because I've got to head off. Hopefully this video has worked without any kind of awkward syncing issues with the audio, which if it has gone wrong, you'll now be going, it didn't work. But yeah, going to head off now. We'll have much more to talk about as well in the next one, because we'll have the friendly to really dissect against Motherwell. More World Cup matches, of course, as well. I'll do something at the weekend, probably Sunday. So we'll have the England match. We'll have the Motherwell friendly. We'll be able to look ahead. Yeah, there'll be loads for us to discuss. So it's good. Tottenham Hotspur's coming back. Yay! Great stuff. So yeah, going to head off now. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.